The first one is about designing a program for the Engine of Change curriculum. Um, I'm creating an engine of change in the way that we teach about the Army's engine of change. So the Army's force management process is the collection of principles and procedures that we use to meet the strategic needs of the Army and the nation. So the nation has strategic goals for the Department of Defense to implement, and then the Army has a portion of that. And so we've got to design an Army to address the opportunities and threats in the world over the next 30 to 50 years. So some of those things we have to start figuring out now, and the answer's got to be good enough so that they're still useful 30 to 50 years from now. So we have to do some deep think to get that right. You don't just accidentally do that. But some of those things are long lead time solutions or take a lot of money or a lot of equipment to develop. So you have to get the those kinds of things correct early enough so that you can use time, money, and experience to iterate towards that success. So to meet those strategic needs of the Army allows us to meet the strategic needs of the Department of Defense and then the strategic needs of the nation. So how we do that is called Army Force Management. And that we think of that force management process as the engine of change. Well, I'm not satisfied with the way that we're teaching that. I'm an expert in that area, both from my Army experience and Army education, but also because of the things that I've learned through Colorado Tech, that I know that there's better ways to do that. So this is me acting as an agent of change, as an internal consultant to my department, which has a piece of our college mission, and then a consultant to our college leadership who's trying to figure out how to do this inside our total curriculum. And then I'm acting as an agent of change for the Army to force our college to do the right thing to meet the Army's needs. So I'm operating at multiple layers using leverage to do that. Okay, so that's what this project is about. So this slide is sort of my top scale or top shelf design. So above the line, above this black line, is what I call the strategic bottom line for F100 design for academic year 2020. That starts in September or August of this year, August 19th through June of 2020. That's the next academic year. And F100 or Force Management 100 is the course that represents this system for force management or organizational change. It represents about 8% of the total contact hours that our college will deliver to all of the organizational leaders that come to our course. So we have, as our students, 1,500 of the top half of that Army year group, they come to the resident course. The other 1,500 officers on active duty, plus another 5,000 officers in the Guard and the Reserve, will take this same course, but through distance learning or online learning or hybrid learning. So this really reaches out to over 7,000 officers every year. So these are all of the organizational leaders who are going to take strategic guidance and turn that into programs and activities and projects and day-to-day operations in order to make the Army ready for its mission today, but also to manage its change as it transitions to the Army of the future. So force management is really operating in multiple time frames to create current readiness in the force, but also to modernize it so it's ready for future challenges, and then at the deep level, to get the design correct so that the Army that we are developing will continue to adapt to and meet the needs of the future. Okay, so that's a significant challenge. A 30 to 50 year time horizon on one end, but then how do I create ready units today with the resources that we have, and how do I make efficient use of all those resources in the in-between time. So that's operating in multiple time frames is a challenge. Well, the guy that's responsible for this for our college and for all Army education is a 3-star general. And I think that he could do a better job of articulating what he expects our college to do as part of his responsibility, which is to make the Army ready. I think we could do better, and I think part of the reason that we're not doing better is that he's given us maybe some incomplete guidance or given us more room for initiative, and we're not responding to that well. So I'm creating this straw man argument of what he might say to us to do 2 things. Number one, to make our college and my department aware of what it is that we ought to be doing to support his intention. And then if we don't do that, then this could be something that I go brief him on and say, look, sir, if you were to say these things, you would force us to do what we should be doing and to meet your objectives. So I'm looking at this as a strategic communication project that will cause us to do the right thing with initiative, or to create a way whereby we could be directed to do it if that's what it takes. Because I'm of the professional opinion that we should be doing what I describe here next. Okay, so the top shelf, or the above the line, is the strategic so what of this whole project, and it starts with the box on the left, what I call the drivers of change. Now, the only reason we have an Army and a Department of Defense is to achieve mission success in all the regions of the world. Now, what we do is we create GCCs, or Geographic Combatant Commanders. What we've done is divide the world up into 5 buckets and put a 4-star general in charge of all Department of Defense units in each of those regions. So we put a 4-star general or an admiral in charge of all of the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine and civilian forces that are trying to achieve the nation's goals in each of those regions. And they come up with their own strategic plans for each of those regions, and then they make their requirements known back to the Department of the Army to say, these are the things that we need the Army to produce in order to do your part of the job in our area. So we call that whole requirements process the GCC's requirements. He's the end user for us. He's the guy that has to get the mission accomplished with the tools that we create. So that's one of the drivers of change, is to stay connected to what our end user or our customer, what our customer really needs. So, so far so good? So we've done a strategic assessment of the marketplace, of the world operational environment, and we've identified what we call the Army's 17 gaps. While we were a nation at war trying to bring peace to the Middle East, doing stability operations, our near-peer competitors like North Korea, Iran, China, and Russia, just to name a few, were developing their own modernization programs to create problems for us while we were busy doing other things. And over the last 15 years, they have made up some of the strategic ground that where we had advantages. And there are 17 areas that we've identified where we have problems maintaining our dominance as a military force. So for us, not only do we want to respond to the GCC requirements, but we want to do something about these 17 gaps. And if we can solve those 17 gaps, then we will actually be meeting those GCC requirements. At the same time, we've created some new operational doctrine that says what we have to do in the future as warfighters and peacemakers, and we call that Field Manual 3.0 operations. It describes at the conceptual level our top strategic plans for how to conduct operations. So we have a new doctrine that is driving many of the things we have to do to modernize. So we have to account for that as part of an update to our professional knowledge. We've also identified 8 CFTs, or cross-functional teams, And these are collections of everybody in the supply chain from the industrial base to the geographic combatant commanders and all the Army units in the field. And we bring them around a table to help us understand at the detail level what they need for day-to-day operations so that we can meet the high-level needs described by those 17 gaps in the GCCs and our emerging requirements. And then finally, the big six turn out to be the six most important high-dollar combat systems that we need to upgrade in order to meet the modernization objectives of our equipment so that we can compete against what our near peer competitors are already fielding. Like the Russians have a better tank than we have, and so we've got to do something with that fleet in order to have equivalent capabilities on the battlefield. So taken together, everything in that box represents the major drivers of change that say the status quo is no longer good enough, that we have to do something about that. And that creates this burning urgency question, I say, in the middle, which is what I believe our three-star general should ask of us. What he should say is, given the fact that we have all these very important drivers of change, and then recognizing that I've given you guys a complete academic year and 2,000 man-years of the Army's best officers as students and faculty, and in an unbelievable campus with incredible resources. I've given you that much raw material, and it's fair to ask, what have you, the college, done with all of those resources to improve the Army and our body of knowledge in order to address all of these urgent drivers of change that are in box number one? I think that's what the general ought to explicitly ask of us. Now, he sort of did that because he got up on the stage at the start of the year and invited us to think about those things. But I think that he wanted to give us room for initiative, and he didn't want to be too prescriptive. He wanted us to unleash our creativity and our critical thinking. But I'm not sure that if he asked us these questions in the third box, says, well, given all of those resources I gave you and the burning urgency of these drivers of change, what have you actually done with this year? Show me how you've improved the Army. What was the value add that you created? What's the justification for spending all these resources based on the products that you came up with on these top-level challenges to the Army? I'm not sure that we're prepared to answer that question in an organized way. Now, there's a lot of things I think we have done, but we haven't really approached the way we've designed the curriculum and conducted our business and collected the results with a focus on answering the existential challenges of the Army. And I think that if we took that perspective, that we could maintain the same level of urgency throughout the year and make sure that we were truly working on the most important things that are driving the challenges in the world. So that's what I think the top-level message ought to be. And that's what I would suggest that our departments and our college should respond to and give the boss these answers and not have to be waiting to be told to do them, but we could just anticipate that he should ask these questions, and then we could answer them and organize ourselves so that we could answer them. That's what showing initiative really means, that we're anticipating what he wants. We're not waiting for him to tell us. That's the same way that a business should be trying to anticipate what their customers need and then give it to them before they even ask. That's how you create customers for life. So that's the connection to the world of strategic planning and alignment when it comes to the commercial world, right? So that's what I mean by the above the line drivers. Now below the line, I've shown a concept for my department which teaches this F100 force management. Now, like I said, our college has about 5 different departments. There's a department of strategy, tactics, leadership, history, and sustainment. I'm in the sustainment department. We teach how to support the Army, but also how to manage the change. And we have about 8% of the contact hours. The other 92% of the hours are spread across these different departments and with some of the practical exercises that we use. So we have a limited number of hours in which to conduct this kind of business. And I'm of the opinion that all we're doing is approaching F100 as an academic exercise and trying to describe a sterile system as if it was something that you could separate from the real world. So we're talking about it at a theoretical level. And my argument is that all we're doing is teaching about force management in order to produce a grade for F100. But what we could be doing is using these drivers of change as practical problems to work on, and then use the F100 lessons as an opportunity to learn how to do the process while actually applying it to real world problems, and that in the synergy between theory and practice, we could do more than just come up with grades, but we could actually produce a whole laundry list of outputs that could be measurable, tangible contributions to the Army and to those GCCs and the forces in the field. And we could answer the boss's question of, well, what are we doing to add value to the Army? We could show that while we're teaching how to manage change, that we're actually also producing possible solutions for how to work on these 17 gaps, for example. And that's what I call using our curriculum to apply power to the wheels. That if we restructured the way we taught, we could create a transmission that would harness this powerful turbo diesel engine of change, and then use a transmission to apply power to the wheels and make a real difference in the Army and in the lives of our officers once they graduate. I think that would be a better way to use all of these resources that the commanding general has given us. So that's my value add proposition. So far, so good? So slide number 2 is my proposal to implement that in a practical way. We're calling it the F100 Scholars Program, and it leverages the baseline teaching to develop students and our own faculty. Now, our own faculty are not necessarily experts in this process, but by going through this practical application, they would end up becoming better teachers. And then in each following year, we'd get better and better because of our practical experience in solving these problems. And so I have a plan that shows how we could take our existing lessons with all the things that we do for preparation and readings and references and new information and practical exercises, and then add to it components from the other departments, how to link it with strategy, tactics, history, leadership, and then apply some research principles to improve our foundation, and then turn that into an educated officer. And then we would validate that through our midterm examinations, which we call X100, which is like an oral defense of thesis, where we ask them 5 or 6 questions and give them an hour grilling to demonstrate that they've integrated the curriculum. I try to show that by integrating these other departments into the way we solve these practical problems, we can actually achieve that integration, and we can demonstrate it in X100 and show that the officer has all of these qualities from applied all the way down to leader manager. And that furthermore, in the second half of the year, we could take this baseline and further develop our students and faculty, because it could produce essays for publication for the rest of the Army to read about our good ideas that we hammered out in the classroom. We could write white papers during our independent study programs in Alpha 401 and 402, which are electives that we teach in the last part of the course. We could improve different elements of our curriculum by bringing student writing and faculty writing into future classrooms. We could develop research proposals for the School of Applied Military Studies, which is the second year for our strategic planners. We could develop theses for our Masters of Military Arts and Science program, which is a master's degree that we award. So we could build on what we started in the first 4 months and actually turn that into the guts of a master's program. And then we could actually support this new program of creating doctors of military arts and sciences. And then that would actually build on all of this goodness. And we could have guys that develop their doctorates in how to do this in a professional way, which would support the Army's research program. And then all of these things are tangible, measurable, positive impacts on the force, and ultimately into the capabilities that the geographic combatant commanders need from the first chart. At the same time, the best of all this written material could be selected for publication in anthologies of our best ideas out of the 1,500 students, take the best 50 or 100, and then come up with those things and produce them as anthologies of our best practices in the Army University Press. So that's how I think we could get a lot more bang for the buck out of the time that we are already spending on this change management program. Check or hold? Are we okay there? So if that's the implementing design, the next thing is how on my teaching team, which is teaching team 15 out of 24, so we have 12 faculty members that teach a group of 64, and there's another 24 of those teams. So what I show on this one is how that I can take those sterile lessons that we have. Now here, the above the line is still everything that we borrowed from chart 1, which showed the urgent drivers. And I show how we could actually start on day 1 in C100 Foundations, which is how we teach the basics of reading, writing, thinking, and speaking with critical thinking and creative thinking and written communication and oral communication. And I show that if we started with one of these drivers of change that the student could pick, that they could turn it in C100 into an actual problem statement instead of just writing generic information papers about anything just to see if we can see if they write. We could actually have them writing about the most important ideas and challenges that we have, and that would be an improvement. And then we could connect those ideas to the strategic guidance, which happens in one of our blocks. We can improve that concept for improvement in our tactical lessons, where we could go deeper into unit capabilities specifically. And then in our force management project, we could turn that into a project that produces a suitable, feasible, acceptable solution as part of an individual deliverable. It would be a structured concept that improved the gap, that incorporated strategy and tactics, and they would have to produce a written executive summary and a 5-minute oral briefing that would describe very holistically the broad concept for change that they propose. And that's sort of like an entrepreneur would use to brief an angel investor. You have to have the ability to quickly interest them in why your idea adds massive value to the enterprise. So we need officers that can think like entrepreneurs. At the same time, we could then use our leadership instruction and history instruction to improve that concept, to show how it could be implemented, and then use history to help illuminate the idea. And now we could, as you point out, create agile thinkers. This would be a demonstration that each of our officers could conceptualize the challenge, organize a good solution, make a solid recommendation that was professional, integrating all of the curriculum products into their plan, and they could develop an implementation plan using the Cotter model that's described in the leadership proposal, in the leadership courses, and then communicate that effectively in reading or in writing and orally. And then this would be an excellent contribution to our X100 midterm examination, which right now asks them 5 surprise questions from a deck of 50, and it's almost like a point ambush to see if they can respond. I believe that we could take one of those questions and turn it into an update of this project, and then they could have a deliberate, almost like a thesis defense opening remarks that would show they had all of these qualities, and it would improve the quality of our midterm assessment. And then if we did that in the second half of the year during the advanced operations course, we could then take that capability that was approved and learn how to field it to the Army and then train it in a unit, how to deploy it strategically to a region of the world, and then use it in actual operations in our simulations to see how it might compete against a thinking enemy. So by integrating the curriculum in this way and connecting it to the rest of the year, we would add much more tangible, measurable value to the Army. So that's my proposal for how our team could act as a pilot. So